call the meeting to order for the Committee of the Whole. In the spirit of truth and reconciliation, we acknowledge the town of Edson is located on Treaty 6 territory, the traditional and ancestral lands of the Niqawaq, the Saulteaux, the Siksika, the Piikani, the Kenai, the Dene, the Nakota Sioux, and the Otipemisiwak Métis nations. We honor the knowledge of this land, the elders and youth which gather here, and our ancestors who have gathered here for centuries. With that, could I please get a motion to accept the agenda? Councillor Moore.
That the agenda for March 11th, 2025 Committee of the Whole meeting be adopted as presented.
Thank you, Councillor Moore. There's no additions or deletions to the agenda. All right, hearing none, all those in favor? Opposed? The motion is carried. Next, if I get a motion, please, for the minutes of the February 11th, 2025 Committee of the Whole meeting. Councillor Chachka.
I so move.
Thank you, Councillor Chachka. Is there any errors, omissions, deletions, or corrections to such minutes? All right, hearing none, all those in favor? Those opposed? That motion is carried. We have no presentations and delegations. First order of business is a presentation by Adrian Tate, a returning officer, to talk about our draft election signed bylaw number 2319. Welcome, Ms. Tate. Please key your mic.
Good evening, committee members. Thank you for your time this evening. During the February 11th Committee of the Whole meeting, we brought the draft election sign bylaw to you for your consideration. At that time, administration heard a mix of perspectives, including requests for more permitted zones, increased flexibility in sign sizes, and administration has taken this feedback into consideration, done a little bit more research, and today we would like to present the proposed updates to the bylaw. The election sign bylaw establishes clear standards for election sign placement, size, and general regulations. This is geared to align with federal, provincial, and municipal legislation and would affect all three elections, not just your municipal elections. It defines the both permitted and prohibited areas, provides a structured framework for enforcement to ensure compliance, which we heard was lacking last time, and strikes a balance, or aims to strike a balance between candidates' right to campaign and public safety while maintaining community standards. As the committee is aware, the highway corridor presents some unique challenges within the town of Edson. So with that said, anything along Highway 16 corridor, which is 2nd and 4th Avenues, as long as Highway 748 falls under Alberta transportation jurisdiction, and so all candidates would have to follow Alberta transportation guidelines when it comes to election signs. Safety remains a top priority, so maintaining sightlines and reducing distracted driving risks are key considerations. Many of the election sign guidelines within the bylaw are actually derived from Alberta transportation. In addition to not obstructing sightlines or interfering with traffic control devices, election signs cannot be placed near intersections or within 500 meters of construction zones. So Elections Alberta, these are the sign guidelines set out by them. So while the municipality and the election sign bylaw sets the standards for the municipality, advertising guidelines are actually regulated through Alberta, or through Elections Alberta. To that end, we've just as a snapshot so that you can see what they recommend for their guidelines. And we did confirm with them that they consider a 24-inch by 16-inch as the standard lawn size. And that's actually quite a bit smaller than what we see here. One of the key changes to the bylaw that we are proposing is new changes for properties zoned R1R. The new provisions within the draft bylaw allow for up to a maximum of a 4 foot by 8 foot sign within those zones on private fences, exterior walls, or non-residential properties with property owner permission. With regards to private fences and private buildings, again, that 4-foot by 8-foot sign would be permitted, but it must not extend past the perimeter of that fence or wall. For non-residential properties, the height is 8 feet would be the maximum, and the maximum sign face area is the same. For residential sign options, these are the ones on people's lawns. We did keep the size the same, keeping in mind though that because that is the maximum size, doesn't mean that that's the size you have to go with. You do have all of the other options there, 12 by 18, 24 by 18, which is, according to the local printers, the most popular lawn sign size in Edson. You could go up to 36 by 24, and still all those would be within the permitted size. We actually allow for even larger than that, so you could consider, a candidate could consider a maximum size to include one of the smaller signs plus a rider on the top or the side, just as options. We have also updated the map. Following the feedback received, Schedule A has been updated to reflect the designated boulevard zones that we would recommend. We are not recommending signs to be permitted in park, playground zones, school zones, or traffic circles due to safety concerns. Those are all consistently best practice, and I'll speak to that a little bit later on. As the area around the leisure center will be an active construction zone during both the federal and upcoming municipal elections, and as per Alberta Transportation recommendations, signs should not be placed within 500 meters of a construction zone. This is considered a safety concern, so we have included that. Additionally, in the future, once the construction is complete, should the leisure center be an optimal advanced polling station or polling station, they couldn't be placed there at that time either. The number of residential properties on which candidates may place signs is limited only to the landowner permission that you receive. So the orange on that.
Do you mind if I ask a question since you're on the topic? Or do you want to wait till the end for questions?
It's up to you.
So 500 meters around the leisure center is about 50% of the community. So that means you couldn't put an election sign in a big chunk of the community. Like I understand the transportation side, you don't want election signs conflicting with the half kilometer before a construction zone, but those rules shouldn't apply within a municipality.
So the municipality would have, that's just the recommendation from Alberta Transportation, the municipality would have the right to change that, but it is considered, they do that for safety because it is a busy area and it is, they do consider election signs as distracting from.
Okay, and I understand that, but like the leisure center is also in a 30-kilometer-hour zone. So like half a kilometer from the leisure centers, like Edson's only 1.5 kilometers long. Like, I don't know, okay, I'll let it. Councillor Taylor.
Through the chair to Ms. Tate, on that same topic, sorry, is that 500 meters the way the bird flies or the crow flies or like by road? Those are two different distances.
I would have, through the chair to Councillor Taylor, thank you for the question. I would have to get back to you. They just say perimeter.
Okay, and one follow-up. When you say no signs, is that only on public property or on private property as well? So any private property around, say, a construction zone wouldn't be able to have a sign as well, according to the recommendation or guideline?
Through the chair to Councillor Taylor, I believe that would be along the roads, along the permitted, the public.
Just on the public areas. Okay, thank you.
Councillor Bevan?
Through the chair.
Your mic's not on.
I thought you had a double hit it. Through the chair. On your bench, on your signs you put up, last election there was people that put on benches that are around their town. Can they be put back up on the benches if you talk to the owner of the benches and that? And they were putting the big signs on the benches and they're all right alongside the highway or they're over by the hospital. They're up all over town here. So can you put your signs on those benches if they let you?
Through the chair to Councillor Bevan, thank you for the question. Yes, that would be considered paid advertising, and it is an already approved advertising location.
Okay, and maybe the further the question, so like if I think about construction, even in this year, which is an election year, and there's 2 elections this year, there better be 2 elections. Ours is guaranteed. Like we're gonna have a lot of construction in another neighborhood, which is within so basically we just might as well say no signs, like because once you get a half a kilometer from around the leisure center and then a half a kilometer away from where we're doing the infrastructure work there, and God forbid we do another piece of work in another neighborhood, like I can't wrap my head around the 500 meters. Like I understand on highways, but in town it doesn't make any sense.
So through to the chair, thank you. It is the recommendation. You have the option to not go with it. That was one of the reasons for not including the leisure center in the permitted areas, right? If you notice, none of the town-owned lands, like where there's a facility, are being recommended, which I will speak to actually in the next slide. This was the boulevard zones, and then the orange is the R1R properties where the larger signs are permitted or would be permitted with council approval.
All right, we continue on, please.
For sign, actually, I'm just gonna go like this. So it's a look at some of the comparator communities where they do have election sign bylaws. Some communities, such as Leduc, don't actually have a specific election sign bylaw. They actually deal with it within their land use bylaw. So these are just some of the ones that we have compared when we were developing ours. Places like White Court, some of them have policies. They allow election signs within the interior of a facility only on bus shelters, though, and on vacant utility corridors, but nowhere else that there is a town-owned facility. And they do not allow them on exterior lands or adjacent to facilities. Fort Saskatchewan does allow them with some restrictions. I do have to apologize. The school zones, being permitted in the school zones is not actually a provincial regulation. It is a recommendation. And so best practice is to not have them, as you can see by the comparator communities there. So they do not prohibit playground zones. However, I have also conferred with both Living Waters and GYPSD, neither of which permit signs on school division property. So because it's the school division that owns the property and not the schools, permission would have to be from the divisions, and I have received confirmation from both divisions that they do not allow them. So I don't know. The ones that say along
Mayor Zahara?
approved boulevards, some of them have asterisks. Those particular ones, none of the approved boulevards are in school zones, playground zones, or parks. So they have permitted boulevards similar to ours. They're typically high traffic areas where you can get the most drive-by traffic.
Mayor Zahara has a question.
Yeah, through to Ms. Tate, thank you for the work you're putting into this. Lots to be considered. I just find it interesting that the school division say they don't allow signage on their properties when there was a big election sign on one of their properties last election. I agree that probably not wise to have it on school division properties, which has always been longstanding practice, but I know for a fact that there was a sign on a particular school division's property for 2 weeks and they did nothing about it, so.
I have a further question. So I'm looking at the list, so there's some notable communities left out of your comparators, like Hinton's not on there, Stony Plain's not on there. A lot of these are bigger, larger growing municipalities. Like the challenge I have with data is if I wanted to show you that nobody's doing it, I wouldn't show you the data of who's doing it. So, for me, it's school property is one thing. I don't think I have people really but there's boulevards in their school zones. And there's lots of areas, and I'm a big fan of the electoral process, and I think that there's people who may not know everybody in town that want to run, so maybe they want to put signs out. So I'm a little challenged with some of the data. The data is great, and I appreciate you getting that data. It's just like Hinton's not on there, and Stony Plain's not on there. Those are close by. Drain Valley's not on there. So,
So through the chair, if I may, not every community has an election sign bylaw. And that is part of.
and I'm not surprised Canmore is a no and a no, but it's my own point.
Would you like me to continue or?
Yes, please, sorry.
Okay. And through the chair, if I'm, to Mayor Zahara, I'm not sure what has been permitted or what has been enforced previously. I just know that as of today's correspondence with the school divisions, they both said they are not allowed. So, one of the other things that was heard during the first presentation to committee was there was an inconsistencies in enforcement was identified as a past concern. This aims to address that. Schedule B of the bylaw allows for enforcement provisions. Emphasis will always be on education first. That would be through a procedure, though not within the bylaw itself. A scaled fine structure, however, does present challenges for our enforcement system. I have conferred with our enforcement manager. So he is recommending what is presented in Schedule B as where it's just a static fine. Removed signs would be stored at Public Works for 10 days before disposal if they have to be removed. Again, town staff would be permitted to remove signs that interfere with municipal operations or violate the placement regulations or post safety standards. Council or committee has the option to not include fines, to provide an alternate fine structure, or no change to the proposed Schedule B.
Mayor Zahara.
Thank you. So my perspective on this, I truly hate election signs. I think they're just gross and ugly, and they're all over the place, and it just gets saturated. But I understand the need for them, and it certainly helps with the electoral process and allowing people to get their names out. The most effective way to get your name out is to have signage on private property. But with that said, just reviewing this, I don't see a need to have a provision of not having signs within a construction zone within 500 meters. For sure, not in a construction zone, but I don't think we need to go further out than that within the municipality. I think the highway is fine, following whatever Alberta Transportation wants for the highway. And we do have a number of areas that do have boulevards that are adjacent to parks and school zones and that sort of thing. Particularly when I look by Griffiths Park, there's certainly a section in there that I think would be okay for signage. It's highly visible, great sight lines. You're not blocking anybody because you can see from far away. So I do think that we probably could have more areas than is included here, but I just don't see a need to have it 500 meters outside of a construction zone. I think that's just overkill, myself personally. And I totally agree with fines because in some other neighboring municipalities, they had people that ran for election just chose not to deal with their signs afterwards. And if that's the attitude somebody's going to have, then they should be subject to fines if we have to go start taking down signs.
Thank you, Mayor Zahara. Councillor Taylor.
Through the mayor to Ms. Tate, again, I echo Mayor Zahara's words regarding the work that you put into this. I do see the issue of and this is the switch I guess we've done. We went from don't put it places in the first draft we look at it. Now we're putting it into where we can place them. 100% anyone could drive around town and find new places that are not listed in the green section. There's going to be places like, ooh, this is a good spot, and I'm going to place it right here. And then they're going to check their map and go, I can't place it there. But it is a good spot. It's not causing any issues. It's not causing any, it may be on public property, but it's not causing any traffic issues or that sort of thing. So I'm struggling with the regulation of don't place it places, and then we're trying to find all the places where you can place them, and you'll never find all the places. You won't. But when you're out campaigning, you do. You'll find it. And that is, it's a tremendous challenge when creating this bylaw that, again, we've never done before. So I am torn about which direction to go there, so which is easier, whether it's worded that you can have like some like boulevards and things like that, or worded that it's not obstructing the flow of traffic, or they're not obstructing safety in any way, and maybe have the map just saying these are the places you can't place them. The absolute no's, and the absolute no's. And we've talked about this: town office, leisure center, obviously schools by the sounds of it, Centennial Park, fire hall, things like that. Those are the absolute no's. But then there has to be a bit of discretion in there to say, so long as it's not imposing upon safety, as long as it's not imposing upon traffic flow, it's never caused any issues before, not to my knowledge anyways. And not only did I run 4 years ago, but I've campaigned, been campaign manager a lot of times with a lot of signs, and never had issues in terms of having signs being placed in a variety of places. So those are my comments.
Thank you, Councillor Taylor. Councillor Chechka?
Thanks. Through the chair to, council and administration. Thank you, Ms. Tate, for your work on this. It's definitely, there's more to consider than what meets the eye, I guess. A couple things. So I'm in favor of option 3 with the fines. I think that's great. I know last time I was a bit vocal. I'm not a fan of election signs. They're very untidy, and they just don't look nice. Even the nicest looking ones. Yeah. And I think, yeah, well, trying to spruce it up, I guess. So I do like that there's, that it's listed where it's at. And when we talk about, maybe new people running and trying to ensure that they have an opportunity to get their face out there, I think it's, if we're going to mention that part, I think there's also an advantage to incumbents, because if you've saved your signs, you already have them from the previous election, and they're expensive. So by reducing the amount of spaces, it makes it a little bit more equitable for someone who doesn't have, up to $10,000 to spend on your election campaign, if that's still the number. And you can get your face out there for a little bit of a better price. There's a few spots on the highway that are listed there. We've got some spots on the throughout the community, and the private properties, right? These are not your only ways of getting your name out there. Like, you can have pamphlets, you can walk door to door, you can do the radio, mail outs. This is just one avenue of getting your name out there, and getting people to know you. So I think it's nice for the beautification to what you have here. I'm comfortable with this, but I do have to agree with the construction zone. I think that's a little bit cumbersome to try to navigate that for someone who's running in the election, as well as for staff to determine how far that is away. Exactly. And, we hope to have lots of construction in the community, I think, all the time, and that makes it a little bit tricky. I'm okay either with eliminating it and just not having it in construction zones, or, a smaller distance away from those construction zones, because we have several blocks before we get to the construction zone that you'll, see the signage then. So that's my what I want to share.
Thank you, Councillor Chechka. Councillor Bevan?
Through the chair, I do agree with what you put out here. I do like it in that. I agree with the construction signs too, and that not around there, because it gets hectic there, and people are slowing down, looking, it can be an accident and stuff like that. I don't mind what you hear. The fines, I'm happy with, putting the fines on, because like Mayor Sayers says, they don't come and pick them up and they sit there for the next 2 or 3 weeks or months or whatever, and that. And even though they've been told to pick them up, they don't pick them up. We find them in the creeks or every place else like that. And I also notice that, I just say that if you want to put something up, I've always had signs on my truck, magnetic signs put on there, and that draws more interest than any sign you could find around any place on a boulevard, because if you drive around town, no matter what you do, Like I like to drive to town all over the place to see what's going on, what the town is doing. I get more comments than that they see my signs on my truck or whatever and that. And it done way a lot better than seeing a sign on the boulevard or whatever and that.
Thank you. I agree with everybody that they're not attractive, but they do a couple of important things. One is those who don't pay attention know there must be an election coming. I agree with the fines, especially after an election. I think it is disrespectful to elections if you don't get your signs down within a day or two. On the fine side of it, I'd actually like to see a proper process where you get a warning ticket and then you get a fine. So it's documented. And the reason I say that is I don't ever want somebody to say, well, you call so-and-so, you gave him 3 phone calls. I only got 1 phone call. And then we have no way of tracking or understanding if that's a factual statement or not. This way, if enforcement has to talk to a candidate, they issue them a warning. They don't have a choice the next time. They're issuing them a fine. They can't be lenient with them the second time. And it eliminates, because in elections, and we're a small town, so you don't normally see it, but I'd hate to see it, where they accuse the enforcement people of having a relationship with and I don't mean they know the person, or they're I could use myself as an example. I'm on the fire department, so people who enforcement hangs around the fire department, so they could treat me differently than they treat Councillor Taylor, and that's not fair. So I think we should have a very formal process for that. You get your warning, ticket is issued, it's in the ticket book, we know about it, and then the second time you're issued your fine. And whatever that looks like, I don't know, but I just want it so that you can't cry foul. That's all I care about with that. And I do like Councillor Taylor's idea of where you shouldn't put it as opposed to just the spots where you can put it. Because there is a lot of places in the community signs do work well, certain boulevards. And, they are an important part of the process. So, and you don't have to put up signs if you don't want to, but Councillor Taylor.
Yeah, through the chair to council and administration. We just think back why we're putting this bylaw in. Like at the end of the day, we're putting it in. We want clear and consistent timelines of when people can put up signs. That's made clear in the bylaw. Fines, I think we're pretty unanimous that we want fines. We have a clear direction on sizes and safety, perhaps an absolute no list, but careful about making things too cumbersome. And the reason why I think we would get ourselves into trouble, one, it can make complications for people running, and at the same time can make major complications for enforcement as well. That they're going to be out there every day. Oh, this sign's in the wrong spot. Now I got to call this guy. Now this sign's in the wrong spot. It's like, again, we've had my understanding in the last several elections, and this goes back to 2007. I've been running elections in terms of as part of a campaign. Very few, if any, concerns. Very few in terms of signs. Yes, in terms of what we've done and that sort of thing, that I think if we make things over cumbersome and complicated, you're going to have way more complications with enforcement.
Mayor Zahara?
Thank you, and I'm sure Ms. Tate is sick and tired of the sign election bylaw. I would tend to agree with that statement that it might be easier to show where the zones are absolutely not allowed, your centennial parks, around your schools, around the fire department, around the leisure center. And then the rest, I think people can figure out on their own, and make enforcement a lot more easier than saying, oh, he's looking at this map, he's just past that green line, so he's out of the zone. There's all kinds of arguments that happen during election season. I had my signs removed while others were still up by certain departments. And so, and I think it comes down to fairness. Everybody's got to be treated the same. And it doesn't matter if you're an incumbent or a newcomer, everybody's playing by the same rules, same enforcement. And, enforcement has a job to do and they need to be respected. So trying to make it as easy as we can for them and making sure that everybody's treated fairly and not making it overly stressful for them or the candidates. Most candidates have not only doing the election, but they have other lives and jobs and things going on that when you have to go out there and change your signs out all the time, you know, that's also an issue. So, yeah, that's my comments.
CEO Beveridge?
Thank you. Committee, this is flashbacks to other times in other council chambers of speaking about the election sign bylaw. I fully anticipated that this was going to be a lively discussion. There's different perspectives with regards to signage, and you know, and carefully trying, I think, from the perspective of administration, trying to strike a balance between enough guidance, because ultimately, as Councillor Taylor voiced, this really is about transparency and trying to make sure that everyone knows what the rules are, so there's not confusion. Election time is a very challenging time for a lot of, you know, for the staff of the municipality, trying to make sure that we're serving everyone equally, as well as, you know, and still doing the work that we do for the community each day. So I think, you know, Ms. Tate, with the work that she's done, and I think council has eloquently stated that it's been a lot of work to get here. And I think that's where this comes from. And I think, you know, when we spoke about the approved, I'm going to speak about this a little bit, about showing where it's approved. It was seemingly easier to show where it was approved than it was getting into, because we weren't quite clear from where council's direction was last time we spoke about this with regards to where these signs could not be placed. So I believe that with some of this information, it probably creates a lot more clarity for Ms. Tate and the groups that will be enforcing this. I think that's critical to make sure that we don't want to add overly bureaucratic processes for the individuals that are actually having to deal with this. It's not very much fun to deal with individuals that are upset about where the sign is placed here and dealing with all of that. And this allows to make it easier for the individual calling and the individual dealing with that on the other end as well. So thank you for your comments.
Thank you. Do you have more?
If I may, through the chair to the committee, so just to be clear, the 500 meters around construction zone from Alberta Transportation, that's their rule. That is not actually in the bylaw, but that was the reason why we weren't permitting, or one of the reasons why we weren't permitting around the leisure center. It wasn't that we were enforcing the 500 meters. So just so that is clear. I think I have enough information. If you have any other questions, I'm happy to answer.
Mayor Zahara?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. Just wondering if Councilor Moore has any comments on this. He's not spoken.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, I would imagine that for people who are thinking of running, that these rules, or some of them, will be published in the newspaper, or will they be circulated by a particular pamphlet to people who want to know, or if it'll be available in the town office here at some point?
Through the chair to Councillor Moore, thank you. Yes, they will be, once approved, would be part of the candidate information package. We do have a candidate information guide, and the election sign guide would go along with that.
And one supplemental question. Did I hear you say that there'd be no more signs allowed in the traffic circle beside the hospital? Because there was a lot there last time, but a lot.
Through the chair to Councillor Moore, that would likely change based on council's feedback at the moment, but Alberta Transportation does not recommend signs in traffic circles. They consider them distracted driving. Again, that's a municipal road.
It is a great location for signs, though. You guys are just jealous because I had mine there first. All right. Anything else?
No, not unless you have any.
I think it's been said, but thank you for your work on this. All right. Moving on. The next presentation is by Mr. Betchy, Communications Coordinator, our draft social media policy IT-I-6-C and social media procedure IT-I-6-C-B.
All right, through the chair to members of council, I'm here to present on the social media policy. In 2018, council passed both of our council and staff social media policies, which outlined the use and rules surrounding social media for the town of Edson. During our review, we found that most of the policy has actually stood up over time, but we did make a few key changes. So firstly, combining council and staff policies. As we went through different municipalities' policies in this, we found that a vast majority had one combined policy that included a separate section for council. With council having its own code of conduct, this was determined the best way to move forward. We added definitions and clarity of language throughout to better line up with other town policies. The schedules attached to the policy previously were better suited for a staff procedure document, which is our internal process and for training as well. We've added additional clarity for the FOIP and privacy laws and regulations. We felt our previous policy needed a bit more teeth, so to speak, so we've addressed that with our violation clause. And we wanted some more consistent review frequency every 3 years in the new policy. With the increasing changes in social media use and regulations, the policy should be reviewed on a more regular basis. So as we reviewed the policy and reviewed the policies of other communities, we did look at a few options. There was the option of allowing or disallowing social media commenting. Some communities have removed the ability for public to comment, citing hate speech, online harassment, misinformation, staff wellness. We've chosen not to go down that road at this time. We've actually increased our interaction with the public by answering more questions and correcting some misinformation that's out there. We have seen an increase in some poor online behavior over the years, but it hasn't been a major concern for the town of Edson in the time that we've been on social media. We feel the benefits in the open, interactive communication far outweigh the risks at this time. Social media platforms. So what platforms the town of Edson uses is consistently under review as new platforms pop up, others fizzle out. Facebook remains our platform with the highest engagement numbers. I'll go through some of those numbers shortly. X, formerly Twitter, remains our lowest and is something we're reviewing if we actually even need to be on there. The topic of removing comments. So this is where things often get tricky, where we've highlighted and pinned our rules on our social media pages. We strive not to remove any comments unless they're really over the top, over the lines of the rules that we posted. It generally has to be pretty egregious. That being said, Facebook often hides comments that are under our automatic filter. With anything with curse words in it, anything with images or links automatically get hidden. This helps reduce the amount of spam messaging we get and helps keep the discussion more civil. We do go back and review these posts that have been automatically filtered just to make sure that they meet that criteria. There's been some discussion surrounding misinformation. That's a delicate balance that we have between people's freedom of expression and maintaining a space of truth. You're never going to get rid of misinformation on the internet. It takes a lot more than 2 people to do that. It's essentially what a large part of the internet has become. But we try to balance that by responding with facts. And you have to hope that people kind of ignore the trolls and ignore the people that are saying the town and council are getting kickbacks. And we wish, we don't. We saw all through COVID that if you remove comments, it's perceived as us deciding what's true and what's not true, and it's perceived as censorship. We all know that opinions are not facts, but we don't have the manpower to be the Facebook truth police, I guess. In the US, they literally cannot erase comments. It's part of their First Amendment speech rights. They cannot remove any comments. So either they have it turned off or they allow everything. Bottom line is we do our best to ensure that everyone has their say. We value the diverse opinions and discussions, be it positive or negative. In my 15 years with the town, we've only banned 2 people for consistently breaking the rules. We really try to monitor it and be as lenient as we can without allowing them to keep crossing that line. So our social media numbers right now, Facebook has over 10,000 followers, heavy engagement on Facebook as we've seen over the last few weeks. X, 801 followers, but next to no engagement. We can post 1 million posts and get maybe one like on it. It's really not a place that the town of Edson residents go to for our information. Instagram has 1,500 followers, just about 1,500 followers, moderate engagement. We just started posting more on Instagram in the last year, so that number is growing. LinkedIn, we have 610 followers, low to moderate engagement, but again, that's something we've just started posting to more regularly. And our YouTube channel has 363 subscribers, low engagement, but high watch times. So that's really all I have, unless you have any questions specifically about the policy.
Thank you, Mr. Becci. Council, questions? Councillor Taylor.
Through the chair to Mr. Becci, thank you for putting this together, amalgamating all the policies into one. It is a good idea. I think it's a good idea, and I'm glad that you're recommending as well that we not turn off the comments. I believe in free expression as well. That's one of the charter rights. I mean, you mentioned of the U.S. Constitution. Well, it's in our charter rights as well. You have the right to free expression, right? I am challenged, and first things first, I do like what you've done as of late in the last few months, 6 months, 8 months, is correcting that misinformation. And misinformation, and there is a difference between misinformation and disinformation. Okay, misinformation refers to false info that is not intended to cause harm. It's, well, I thought the multiplex was going to be at Hillendale site. Well, we can correct that. That's correct. Nope. That's, as you see here in the new designs we've had, it's now going to be in the Leisure Center site. That's misinformation. Well, I heard, and people say, well, I heard it's something or whatever. You can correct that information. Disinformation is something different. And that's false information intended to manipulate, cause damage, and guide people or organizations in the wrong direction. Okay. You mentioned about, council getting kickbacks or something like that. And I've seen those kind of comments. That is disinformation. That's deliberately targeting individuals, whether it be council, administration, or other individuals in our community, and trying to cause harm. And we can say, yeah, we just ignore them. And for the most part, people do. But if you look, they are liked. And we have 10,000 subscribers. So this poses that challenge. And for me, I tell you as an educator, I do take offense when people say stuff that is completely 100% wrong, but preface it with, it's my opinion. It's my opinion the earth is flat. I'm sorry, you're wrong. Period. You're wrong. You get 0 marks on your test question for that. It's my opinion that 2 + 2 = 5. No, you're wrong. You get 0 marks. So when I look at this and people are posting those types of things that are completely and deliberately wrong and targeting others to discredit or provide that deliberate disinformation, I think there has to be a stronger tone. And there are only a few. It's not everybody. Most of the information there is misinformation. But disinformation, when you see it, it's clear what the intent is. And having that built within the policy to deal with that disinformation, to say if it's deliberate, and you can clearly tell how people are doing it to get likes, to get responses, for us to be their echo chamber, their soundboard, their microphone, because we have 10,000 followers. If they wish to do that on their own personal pages, that's their prerogative. They can do that. But I think on our page, no, we're not going to be your microphone for disinformation. That cannot be. So that's a strong stance that I have within a social media policy of how we deal with that. My final statement is regarding, I know you're reviewing your X. I don't know about getting rid of X altogether, because I think during like a crisis situation and communications, when you're communicating at a variety of different levels, X can be the primary place where media outlets get their information from. They tend to follow a lot more X than they do Facebook or Instagram and things like that. So those are my comments there. Again, I do take a strong stance against disinformation, because there's a tremendous difference between that and misinformation.
Thank you, Councillor Taylor. Anybody else have any comments? Mayor Zahara.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. I would agree with what Councillor Taylor said. The opportunity for people to share their thoughts and their opinions, I think, is really, really important, and that freedom of speech component. But when you delve into certain users of social media that consistently spread that disinformation or make accusations which, quite frankly, are defamatory, there needs to be a response to that. And they should not be allowed to be posting on our pages as far as I'm concerned. You can say the mayor is a horrible mayor. You can say the mayor doesn't listen to anybody. The mayor is woke. I don't care. That's fine. When you start saying that I'm taking kickbacks, I have a very strong opinion about people that make those kind of comments. It's attacking my character and the character of my colleagues around this table, and it's completely unacceptable. There needs to be a level of decorum when we're dealing with politics, and we need to be able to debate and have arguments and share differing opinions, and that's all fine. That's a democratic process. But when you're literally slandering elected officials or town staff and administration, that goes too far. And I find it completely unacceptable. So, if they want to post that on their personal page, that's their prerogative, but it should not be happening on our corporate accounts. And I don't put up with it on my page. People can have all kinds of opinions and share their thoughts on my page, and that's fine. But when you start attacking others or attacking someone's credibility, it goes a little bit too far for me, especially when they're starting to attack people's families or their employers and that sort of thing. We're all trying to do the best we can with the information we have. So that's my thought. X, a lot of people are moving away from X. That is the machine of misinformation and disinformation right there. And even media, like I can tell council this, that the media follows the town page and my page quite closely, because we often get calls after the fact. I'm sure there's actually some city media watching our council meetings right now, because that's happened as well. They're like, oh yeah, I just Tuesday night I seen it was live streaming and watching, you're watching an Edson council meeting from Calgary. Okay. So I think that's already covered, and in times of emergency and that sort of thing, the Emergency Coordination Center is already connected to all those media outlets sending out those advisories. So I would get rid of X. I think it's a complete waste of time. But I think the other mechanisms, and I would agree that most of our local folks are on Facebook more so than X. And there are still some people that read the newspaper as well.
Thank you, Mayor Zahara. I disagree with the X one, because I don't go on Facebook. I go on X, but I'm like, and then I knew this was coming to council. I'm like, do we even like? And I can't ever remember seeing a tweet, whatever you want to call it, from X on my feed, because I think it has to be more, it has to be happening a lot more than say on a Facebook. But if it disappeared tomorrow, I wouldn't. I'm the first person of the 801. So, I do follow it. They do have community notes now, which has actually made X a lot better than it was, because it's actually great even when the founder or the owner of X gets corrected by community notes. So it's quite comical. But I do like Councillor Taylor's statements and comments on the disinformation. And the defamatory comments should absolutely not be allowed. And I think that they could put parameters that if you're going to make those kind of statements, that maybe you should be removed for a certain period of time. Now, the question I do have is I was told that somebody called me a liberal. So that would count under that, because if anybody's met me, they're pretty hardcore not a liberal. So so that's I find that very hurtful. But my feelings will survive. I'm not sure if that falls under disinformation, because that's absolutely disinformation. But other than that, I have no other comments. Does anybody else have any other comments? All right. Thank you, Mr. Becci. Sorry, I got Mr. Mayor Zahara.
I'm also not a liberal, and I've only helped out on conservative campaigns. I just want to, if we're going to clarify information here, I want to make sure that I'm very clear on that as well.
If I may, Mr. Chair, just you brought up a good point. Like, where do we draw the line, though? Like, does being called a liberal count, and where is that line of disinformation that we fall under?
So if I add to that, the liberal part is me being sarcastic. I could care less if you call me a liberal, because you don't know me if you call me a liberal. That's fact. But saying that people in this count, and maybe I'll quote the other counselors and the mayor, is if people call people that they're on the take, that's a defamatory comment. If you are making a statement that a person is doing something that is untrue and unfounded, that to me is defamatory and absolutely should not be accepted. And we saw that in the last elections. People would make statements about people that are absolutely untrue. So to me, that's just not acceptable. I maybe sit on a different page, because to me, if you rewind the clock for the last, however old democracy is, social teacher, it's been around since the Romans, right? Am I correct in that? It's a long time. Anyway, but we used to have print media, and if the town we used to release all our information on print media, it would hit the news, and people would have to go to the coffee shops and talk to people and get riled up and do things. And now we put a post on the thing, and in 2.5 seconds, we have people blowing it up. And is it right or wrong? I don't know. Like, to me, is this a social engagement thing, or are we actually, is this just us sharing our information? So I'm not going to say to stop interacting, because we have a good system going. I just think that if people are making outlandish lies, then I think they should be removed. And to draw that line, it'd have to be on what is defamatory. To me, it's defamatory, but calling me liberal is not one of those things you'd get removed for. That's just an opinion that you just don't know me. But that's kind of where I'm at with that. Councillor Taylor?
Yeah, through the mayor to Mr. Becci, and to answer your question as well, you know it when you see it. And really, there is a stark difference to somebody who's like obviously has an agenda issue or whatever, or is deliberately trying to derail that conversation into defaming, and it doesn't have to be with anywhere within this table. It could be anywhere within the community, or an organization within the community. It's just not going to be acceptable, especially if you're just making up stuff for the sake of just guiding people in the wrong direction. Again, I say, like, people have the right to express their opinion, to disagree with our policies. It's allowed and encouraged in our democracy that you're allowed to disagree with the policies and the bylaws that we make and the decisions that we make. Or if you like, you can also say you support them too. You're allowed to do that as well, and share your likes and whatever, and have that engagement. Lastly, in the last few months, I do say I like the engagement that you guys have had. The personality on the page it's really nice that when those comments come in, if there's misinformation, that it can be easily corrected, or questions can easily be answered. That's an appropriate engagement tool that we need. So, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Becci. Anything else? All right. We can move on. We're now into business items. Next, we have Doug Wagstaff, General Manager, Community Services and Protective Services, on YCE Multiplex Facility Update.
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The YCE multiplex update is quite short. There's been a lot of work in the background going on, but not a lot out to show for that work over the last month since the last update. However, construction is scheduled to start April 7th. What that will look like in the initial phase, there will be the fencing that'll go up around the multiplex on the north end of from just north of the main entrance around the pool, so that whole north area can begin. There will be some tree removal both on site as well as across to the east where the holding pond will eventually be built. Asphalt stripping will begin within the first few weeks after April 7th, and development of a temporary access for this facility is going to start to be prepared so that construction can begin in whole heart, and that we'll have access temporary prepared when it's needed, when that point comes in the construction process. There will be an official groundbreaking ceremony following substantive construction. So that date has not been set yet, but it's going to be later in the spring. And we were waiting for literally wheels to be turning, dirt to be moved so that you can see that things are happening. So when we have a backdrop for a grand opening, the ribbon's being cut and there's action behind the officials that are doing the groundbreaking. So it's exciting that we are getting to that point when we're going to be beginning to see as a community the actual construction activity. It won't just be talk and drawings and plans. It will be actual activity. With that, I do want to touch on what we have announced with regards to the future parking. Just the design highlights there is that this is a clear and organized structure for easy navigation for those that are in and looking for parking in the immediate area associated with the activities of the multiplex. There is a natural path guiding users toward additional parking. They don't need signage to find it. You just follow through once you come out. And if the parking lot on the north is full, you don't have any other choice but to take a right-hand turn and go south where there's additional parking. It doesn't require signage, doesn't require knowledge to where the parking is. It just has that natural flow that circles the facility itself. The conversion of 48th Street to a one-way angle parking, that we came to that both with the ability to have that natural flow without having to look for where the parking is. And when we did the engagement with both the public and internal, the public was certainly clear that if you can limit, hard decisions have to be made where it was going to be placed. But if we could limit cutting of trees, if we limit using existing green space and space that's enjoyed by the community as a whole, that was a preference. So this does also meet that. But it's also very cost effective to build a parking lot standalone on its own for the amount of parking that we're going to require in addition to on-site was going to range between $950 and $1.1 million when you do the underground work, putting curbing, putting in the hard surfacing. And access points, signage, all of that. So it was a very expensive endeavor when we did have existing asphalt that we could utilize with some planning. So this plan, as it exists now, comes in an addition about $500,000. Now, there's yet to be some detailed plans that are going to change that, where the bump outs are, how large those bump outs are going to be. But we're in that range, so it's better than 50% savings on the expenditure of this project. The rationale for having the angle parking on the east side and not on the existing side where the facility is also had to do with a cost-saving measure. There was a $126,000 difference between putting the angle parking on the west side or on the east side because there's an existing sidewalk and lighting there. And so we didn't have to add a sidewalk for people. They can get out of their vehicles. Yes, people may jaywalk, but we can't control that. There is a sidewalk provided for them that they'd be able to walk down to an area and then cross. You don't see that in this concept drawing either, but there will be a crosswalk existing where you see the green square so that people can get across there. Keeping in mind this is a conceptual drawing. And it enhances a one-way, does also enhance pedestrian safety with single lane traffic. That was another thing that we heard in the engagement that we did with the public was in the locations that we had presented in the summer, where there was the lots were to the south of the storm pond and across 49th Avenue on Water Tower Park. It did require crossing a two-way street in both of those scenarios. So this both enhances pedestrian safety, is cost-effective, and has a natural flow of traffic to it. Procurement and tendering, just as a little bit of an update, there's a lot of words on there. The long and short of it is, under the construction management model that we have, some of the tendering goes on as it's needed through the phases of the project. So we're able to be moving forward and getting going. As you're aware, 2 of the tenders have already, or you're previously aware, 2 of the tenders have been awarded. The one for the pre-frame structure for the arena was steel, as well as the mechanical and electrical for the plumbing, and bringing those trades and engineering on board so that we can be doing planning with them in the final stages, as well as securing some of the pre-work on pricing and the design as well. So over the next 6 months, that is continued to roll out. We have heard from Clark Builders that there has been lots of local interest with trades, and local they mean within the region. That could be as far away as Whitecourt or Spruce Grove, but also locally is in the immediate area here in Edson. They've been very pleased with the interest that they've been receiving. And just a reminder, there is updates on the website that if there are interested proponents that want to find out about how they can be involved in that, they can contact Clark Builders directly. And that information is on ycemultiplex.ca. Again, just as a reminder, the budget has, at this point in time, not changed. We will be having an update after the next tender. It closes here in this month, and GEC and Clark Builders are working to be able to provide us an update on this to see where we're at as compared to the budget. We are still approximately 3 million at this point, with 2.85 million, over the approved budget that was approved back last spring. So there will be some decisions that will need to be made around that on any other value engineering or how we'll deal with that. But we'll know for certain over the next 60 days as to where that's going to be heading. And that is the update for March of 2025.
Thank you, Mr. Wagstaff. Councillor Moore.
Through the Deputy Mayor to Mr. Wagstaff, how will the current tariff issues affect our future multiplex construction schedule and costs? What do you see at this point?
I'm going to just, through the chair to Councillor Moore, I'm going to just change your question a little bit. How does the project see? Because there's going to be a difference between how I see it and how the project see it. So that is a question the project team is asking our consultants fairly regularly, as is the steering committee as recently as this afternoon. And frankly, they don't have a strong answer for us at this point in time. I think the same as we hear in the news, there's a lot of uncertainty, a lot of chaos. They're trying to get a handle on that. Some of the things that they have done already, though, were to try to secure some of our pricing. So the pre-tender, the tender that we had for the prefab arena was intentionally brought forward quite short notice, if you recall, council and the public, when we brought it forward. That was them trying to secure both the price as well as the steel itself for that frame. So that they got ahead of it there, and they're looking to do that as much as they possibly can. But frankly, there is an uncertainty there that at this point in time we don't have a firm answer for.
Thank you, Mr. Moore. Councillor Taylor.
Through the chair to Mr. Wagstaff, thank you for the update. I really love these updates now we're getting publicly. It's fantastic. We're seeing the progression of things. With regards to the parking and changing 48th Street to a one-way, you notified the school division, GYPSD primarily, and their transportation department, and did they have any comments regarding that?
We did. We have been in contact with the transportation department at Grand Yellowhead, and they were glad to hear that this was not intended to be implemented anytime sooner than before the end of the school year, so it will not impact routing for this school year, other than there may be a day or two as deliveries arrive, as any construction site may have, where there might be some temporary one-lane pieces. But as far as the changing of that, it won't happen in this school year. And they were also pleased that we had reached out to them in advance. We'd also did it before we released it to the public. We'd had some conversations with with the transportation department. And what they were indicating for us was, whatever is going to happen, just let us know so we can plan ahead, so that we can do our routing of school buses. Didn't have any concerns that raised, and we asked them, did you see any concerns around this? And they didn't have any. It was just a matter of getting them as much leeway time so that they could inform their school bus drivers as well as doing routing.
And just a follow-up, just sort of my comments on this, and I see it, on the days that I've done after-school supervision, it will be a little problematic. There's no question, and I understand why the decision was made to go the route of this, because there's a cost shaving. I understand that, right? But closing 48th Street will cause issues because now you're diverting the buses down 49th Street. You're probably going to need a four-way stop at the corner of 49th and 12th, and perhaps another one at 10th and 49th, because that could be where the buses get diverted. These are decisions that we're going to have to make a little bit down the road. I just, twice a day, I see the congestion between hours about 8:10 and 8:30, and between 3:15 and 3:35. Those, and I'll let you know, those two 20-minute junctions are incredibly busy in those 2-block radiuses. Obviously, we'll have to address this. This is the decision that was made. I voice my opinion on it now. That being said, I also understand why the decision was made, because we have to make choices. And Mr. Wagstaff, you brought up the cost savings, the cost difference is substantial. And these are decisions you have to make because you don't want to lose the scope and spirit of the building that you're creating, right? And if this is a concession, then so be it. I do think there will be problematic issues with busing in the future, but of course we'll have to sort that out in time. And I guess GYPSD has indicated that so long as they know and they can change their routes, but we'll also have to do stuff on our end in terms of ensuring that 49th Street is going to be the go-to route for them, and some four-ways that's going to happen as well. So I understand why the steering committee made their decision, and I guess we'll move forward from there.
Through the chair to Councilor Taylor, just for clarity, you used the word closure. You were indicating that that's closure of the northbound, but it will still be open southbound.
Yeah, sorry, my apologies. Yeah, the closure of that northbound, because I'll let you know that basically that's the route of the buses, right? They'll go up north that road, turn left, and come down towards Holy Redeemer. That's the general route that they follow, right? That gives them the biggest, if they come down 49th Street to turn into the Holy Redeemer parking lot, they're gonna do basically a huge left turn followed by a sharp right. And I'll let you know, when you watch a bus do that, it's a real wild ride watching that. Not impossible. It just creates challenges. So.
Maybe it's also avoidable. They're not doing it now too because it's not a four-way, so it's hard to even get the bus out there. But I guess as a municipality, we can also look at the options of changing which way traffic's flow to make things smooth, right? Yeah. Changing stop signs, removing stop signs, adding stop signs. Because stop signs are cheap, lights are expensive. So,
through the chair to all of council, also we do have a traffic impact assessment that was created for this project, and to be able to do one post opening as well after some time, and those traffic patterns have both changed and been established, would give us some data to be able to show whether or not we do need to make that type of adjustment. So we do have that, pre-construction that we can compare to.
thank you, Mr. Wagstaff. Anybody have any further questions? Anything further?
I do not, thank you.
Well, thank you very much for the update. All right. Next, we have Mr. Chapates, General Manager, Corporate Services, Town of Edson Organizational Information Technology Assessment Report and Strategy. The floor is yours. Let me hit the thing.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just to give some background on this presentation, in the fourth quarter of last year, we worked with Tantus Solutions Group to conduct an IT assessment on our IT systems and to help us develop an IT strategy going forward. Dave McGarva from Tantus will be presenting the findings from the assessment and providing recommendations. This presentation does not, we sort of put on there that we might need to go to closed. The information being shared in the presentation doesn't require us to go to closed, but the opportunity is there if council has specific questions regarding IT security or staffing or those sorts of things. So with that, I'll introduce Dave McGarva from Tantus Solutions Group. Take it away, Dave.
Thanks very much, Chris, and to the chair, thank you very much for entertaining the report presentation this evening. It looks like you've had an interesting session already tonight. I'm going to share my screen. I have a PowerPoint deck, as every good consultant should. And with your permission, I'd like to kind of go through our adventures with Edson.
Yeah, please go ahead.
So Chris gave a good insight. We also have an acknowledgement that we like to read. We had your piece. Just to tell you, my name's Dave McGarva, as I was introduced. I've been a management consultant to municipalities for just over 25 years now. I'm very pleased that I've worked with over 90 municipalities in the province of Alberta and a few outside of that. Folks, my work has been predominantly in Alberta. Working with me on the project, but who unavailable this evening, was Trevor Butler. He's been with us for about a year now, a little over a year. Previous to that, he was the Chief Information Officer for the City of Lethbridge for a number of years. And previous to that, he was the Chief Information Officer for the University of Lethbridge. So between Trevor and I, we were able to work with your staff and ask some good questions, and it was quite enjoyed it. The project intent and background, Chris did a nice job articulating why we were here and what we did. It's also in the header of the decision document in your package, so I won't belabor it. Just to give you an idea of the scope of the project, we kicked it off in mid-October. We reviewed some of the documentation that was provided. Your IT coordinator of the day was excellent in providing us with a deep file of documentation review. We used a technology assessment tool that we've used for a number of years and deployed that through select pieces of the organization just to get an assessment of where people see themselves, how they assess the service that the IT organization in the town provided to them, where they were going, a number of pieces like that. In late November, we summarized the survey results, presented them back to the town administration, and then we came out for a couple of days and we interviewed a number of your staff, and we talked to staff to get a good perception on if we were interpreting the survey results correctly, other ideas, other issues for discussion to work on. From that, we were able to compile our findings that I'm going to share with you this evening. We developed some recommendations and a bit of a roadmap for the town, and that was submitted to the town on December 19th. With Christmas and holidays and all those good stuff, we were unable to present our results until the end of January. We received a bit of feedback at that point, and then we were prepared for this session this evening. So what did we find? Some very interesting things. I will tell you that Edson is unique, as all municipalities seem to be. But unique for a community your size onto where the point at which you're at in your technology evolution. I will point out a few of the unique characteristics. You'll notice at the bottom that we've color-coded the recommendations red, yellow, green. We, in the rollout plan, the roadmap that's provided in the report, they actually lay them out over about a 3-year time horizon. That is not indicating criticality in terms of danger to you from a security perspective or elements like that, but just highlighting what we see as either the most important things to do first or things that there's a causal relationship that they need to be put in place before other recommendations can be pursued. So first finding, pretty straightforward. When there's IT support required by the staff, or council in the town of Edson, there's three sources. There was an IT coordinator position at the time. You have what's called an MSP, a managed service provider in Catalyst Network Solutions. And then also sometimes staff have to go to the vendor of a particular software product, be it your financial system or your permitting systems or anything like that. The challenges that we uncovered was that there was very little understanding among staff of how to get help. How do they initiate the process? Very little understanding of what the IT coordinator did in the organization, the amount that they were able to achieve. A lot of that was very misunderstood about staff. They just knew that if they had a problem, they got a hold of the IT coordinator, magic happened, and their problem got solved. So that to us was something that is pretty critical, that the other elements of your organization need to understand how to work to get service and how they can help solve their problem. I guess the easiest way to put it. So there's a recommendation that we detailed out some ideas on how you may educate staff and council on what the service options are, how they can, what processes go through to get service, and we see that as one of the primary things that could be done. At the same token, not so much for the council layer, as these are internal administrative services, but it's some type of administrative reporting to provide visibility to the IT workloads. You'll see later in the report, very simply put, you're probably understaffed, or you are understaffed in terms of IT resources inside the organization. That's made up for a bit with your managed service provider. But I think there's limited visibility on how heavy that workload is being taken. Around the managed service provider, I won't discuss detailed the work of Catalyst Network Solutions unless you'd like to go into closed session, nor will I discuss the IT coordinator in detail unless we go into closed session. But generally across the organization, there's very high satisfaction with your provider right now. That is unique among municipalities that we work with. Most of the time, one of the reasons we're asked to come in is to help municipalities deal with their managed service provider. That was not the case for you folks. That said, there's that informal process for managing the service requests. That was kind of the element where if someone needed help, they asked the IT coordinator and magic happened, and nobody really understood how that happened. It's not documented. They're quite informal. A lot of it came down to the fact that if it needed to be hands on a computer, your IT coordinator was on site, your MSP is not. So those tasks went to the IT coordinator as opposed to maybe the best way to perform those tasks. Recommendations out of this, your partnership seems good with Catalyst. I think you have an ongoing contract. We saw no reason to change that. There should be some way to allocate the help requests. In most municipalities and in most organizations, there's some type of at least simple service ticket system where I document that you have an issue, I rate it in terms of criticality, and then it's tracked on a path and does it get done. Those type of things were not in place. They were done informally, but they were not necessarily occurring at all times. Maximizing the MSP's workload. Oftentimes, we got the impression and the admission from your IT coordinator that he did things that your MSP could have done, but he wanted to get it done quickly and do it in time, which exacerbated his workload and could have been passed off to the MSP. So those type of things we really think you need to address and to work with the MSP in terms of how you're going to document help requests moving forward, how you're going to provide that service, and some standardization around your IT communication practices so that others are aware, to keep stakeholders involved on IT related projects, if there's going to be outages, how to get services, what the prioritization is on services. There needs to be some to build on that educational aspect from finding one. I know I'm going fairly quickly, but I will pause here if there's any questions or comments on findings 1 and 2.
I don't see anybody in the queue. You can just continue on.
Sure. So at finding 3, this was an interesting finding, and it really helped clarify some of the issues that we were seeing with how you deploy technology in the town. The satisfaction with IT seemed to decrease the higher up in the organizational levels that you went. The comment was made before that the town of Edson is not a massive community. You don't have a massive administrative structure, but there was a noticeable difference as we moved up from folks in the more front lines aspects, where all I want is my computer to get internet access, to moving up where you got to folks in senior levels who are saying, I need to know what type of systems we need to put into place. Do we need to replace our financial system? Do we need to, those elements, they didn't feel that they were getting the same satisfaction. And noted and fully admitted to by the IT coordinator, did not have a lot of time and clarity to do some of those more strategic tasks, the project tasks. Their focus and what they were being recognized for was that day-to-day help desk service, and that's where it seemed to happen. So this kind of showed us a bit of a differentiation in roles that were being desired in the organization, and they were not all being met equally. One of the ways to address that is to clarify these IT roles and the expectations around it. One of the best tools there is, and I'm adamant across municipalities in any aspect of your service delivery, but the idea of documenting a service catalog. And for this one, we're focusing on IT. But what does IT do? What can people expect? So the idea of setting service levels. So if my Microsoft Word goes down and I need help and I put in a help request, what should I expect as a turnaround time for that? Is that an hour? Is that a day? Is that a week? And who's going to do that? And all of this starts at the core of building a service catalog. You have a few other things that we feel you need to deal with first, but that's kind of in our yellow area later in the first year of funding, where there would be resources available to start documenting that and educating staff and council onto what those service levels are, what those services are, and what levels of service they can expect. This is kind of the crux of a lot of it. I would say there's 2 major findings. The IT staffing is far below industry benchmarks. When we did the benchmark survey, we use a tool from a company called Infotech. They have a municipal benchmarking service in there. And when you take the metric IT staff as a percentage of users, Edson was around 0.7%. The municipal average is about 4.8%. Edson actually ranked in the 2nd percentile, which is saying that 98% of other municipalities that have done this assessment have greater staffing ratios. When we talked about the previous IT coordinators' focus on help desk and day-to-day operations, we saw as a natural fit a second position that was more focused on those project-based IT positions. Council has already approved in their budget a records management project. There will need to be a strong IT resource related to that project for you to be successful. And so that is certainly one area where, and now that the IT coordinator is no longer with the organization, we would suggest having both those roles in place, especially when you start rolling out major software implementations like the records management system. There's going to be a need for in-house resources, as well as probably some contract resources to support that as well. And dedicating some of this resource time to the planning of projects and project management of projects. There is a need for greater governance around your IT resources. And when we talk about governance here, I'm talking about administrative governance, not bringing it to council, but having an internal decision mechanism around the administrative responsibilities of what are our priorities, how are projects progressing, what type of information can we share, And there's a number of different structures that can be built among the administrative staff. Even though you have a smaller organization, it's critical that people are on the same page. I guess if I was going to characterize my interactions with your staff, was that they seem incredibly dedicated, but also quite siloed in terms of how the organization operates. That people in their area are focusing on excellence in their area. And there's a bit of a loss to the organization as a whole without a bit more of a cross-organizational dynamic. And I saw it around the IT areas. I'm not sure if that's characteristic of operations at large, but that was certainly something that stood out to us. And so this idea of planning, coordinating those aspects are quite important. This is that lack of governance that I was talking about. Some municipalities, this takes the form of simply, and I hate the idea of another committee, but at least some type of, maybe it's a section of management meetings time to discuss specifically IT issues, to establish some type of governance practice around that, to develop some form of IT policies and annual strategy. There is the opportunity, there are companies that offer the service of a virtual strategic leader, like a senior leader, so that they're not a full-time staff employee, but you can contract someone who understands your organization and understands where you're projecting to go. And then the idea of an annual IT strategy and roadmap, we've given you a plan for 3 years to get to the point where it would make sense to develop a true IT strategy and to look at things like, what are we going to do for cybersecurity? What are we going to do around moving software to the cloud? What are we going to do with software as a service? What are we going to do with storage requirements? All those things that your staffing historically here has not had the expertise or the time to be able to do. And then having some type of governance support for that administrative. There were, when we asked about historic implementations, the idea of change management, which again in a smaller organization is not overly surprising, but the ability for folks to understand what's coming and how that's going to impact them. There's standard project management tools that can be used to help, and standardizing project management practices to help that change management across the organization. What's going to happen if we implement? There's some questions about the telephony in the organization, essentially the telephone systems. What's going to happen with that? How's that going to go if you get to that point where that's a priority? Who's going to be impacted? How is that going to vary between your site locations? A number of those things need to be developed into standard charters or implementation tools or training that could help those go better. Number 7, we talked about, I believe you've already approved the budget for this, but there's certainly, we confirmed the need for records management. There are issues with your record storage, searchability, meeting disposition guidelines. We recommend that you proceed with that, but we also recommend that you might want to delay that until you get some of these resources and tools in place, the staffing in place internally, potentially a third-party support for project management, some of the change management tools and governance pieces that we're talking about. I will tell you, our organization has been involved in a number of records management initiatives. They are one of the more challenging technology initiatives going forward. And to set yourself up for success with this, you may want to delay it briefly before you get on with it. 8 and 9, there are certainly some Wi-Fi issues. It was illustrated to us when someone took their laptop from the staff offices into council chambers and they lost functionality with, I believe it's your financial system. That one was pretty tangible to see. Though there are some pieces that can be done, doing a network assessment, potentially re-architecting how the computers talk to each other and how bandwidth is shared across the organization. And then some of your telephone systems, the telephony aspects of your organization are challenging with your various locations, inability to move calls around if someone calls the wrong part of the organization. Some of those have really direct customer service impacts that we would suggest that staff develop a business case for telephony modernization. What are the options available to you? How's that going to impact your stakeholders? What does the risk profile of that look like? And so that council can weigh it with their long-term decision making about when and if that comes into play. And then the last piece of the puzzle here was sort of applications. Historically, and again, not different from a lot of municipalities, similar size to you, actually several that are larger than you. The evolution of municipalities, if you look back over the last 25 years, 30 years of how organizations have evolved, municipalities are unique creatures and I love working with them because there's no business in the town of Edson that has 26 or 27 different service lines. That is the complexity of municipal government, and that's one of the really interesting pieces. The challenge is over the last couple of decades, you'll see municipalities start to organize themselves by function. So you have a fire service that's independent from some of the other elements. You have a planning and development aspect that may be separated a bit from your infrastructure function. You have corporate services and finance, communication, technology that is kind of distant from all those other elements, which allows them to focus and specialize on their task. But what it also does is you tend to see computer systems being purchased that are bought independently of that silo's need, not of the organization as a whole. And as such, the quick inventory, or we went through the inventory of your applications, the computer programs that you purchased, and there's multiple redundancies. You have probably, I don't have it right in front of me, but I think it was 3 or 4 different ways you could do work orders across the organization. You have a number of these other pieces where either there could be great efficiency gains, potentially cost saving gains, if you picked one product and rolled it out across the organization. Some of those are coming to end of life. There's going to be some natural unreliability in the systems that they're using. We were told of the story when I don't mean to make light of it, but when you had to evacuate because of the fire, that they were loading a server onto a back of a half ton because all your records were stored on that computer. As a response to that, you moved to a virtual financial system, which isn't the same thing as a cloud-based one. So you're going to have some performance issues because of the bandwidth requirements and some of your network configurations. That is one of the challenges there, that you need to have someone go through and what we call it is an application fit gap analysis. Essentially go through the software that you have. Do we need it? Does it work well? Is it getting out of date? At the same time, you can be stabilizing some of these key systems like your financial system and some of your work, Microsoft Office environment and some of those other elements that you're having challenges with. So stabilizing that is the critical piece, but then the ability to do this fit gap and then actually rationalize some of your applications. So you would stop subscribing to some things because you have another product that can meet those needs. All that said, and it sounds like a lot, we talked a bit of some of this idea of centralizing project delivery that you can look at. These are ones that didn't fall into a specific finding. There are opportunities for you to look at the cloud, the idea of leveraging cloud storage and software as a service applications to free up some of these pieces as well. But all that said, delighted to work with the town of Edson staff. Very passionate group, very knowledgeable group. We felt very welcome and people were very open and honest, which we appreciate. And to resolve this, it's about 3 or 4 years in the report, you'll see a detailed breakdown. These would be the implication costs, the implementation costs to fulfill all of our recommendations. Not included in this is the expected salary for the second FTE position. But because that wasn't a one-time cost, we didn't put it into the budget of implementation costs. But that's what we learned from our tour of Edson and our discussions with your staff.
Thank you. CEO Beveridge?
Thank you. Just one point of clarification. Our IT coordinator is still with the town of Edson at this time, so he's very much with us.
Oh my.
Thank you.
Oh, my apologies.
It's okay.
Does anybody have any questions? I have a question. So in this upgrading this stuff, does this, because we're doing a major project of a new facility, does it include the IT upgrades in that facility as well? Or is that left to be under the budget of the new facility?
We didn't explore that. That wasn't asked of us, and I'm assuming it's under the budget of the facility.
Okay. Mr. Wagstaff?
Not when we're talking about the interconnectivity of the network, but on a larger scale, similar to what we did with Griffiths Park. So when we did the renovations in Griffiths Park, IT, the phones, all that was upgraded. Those are still in the plans of the FF&E within the YCE project.
Okay, thank you. Does anybody else have any questions? Mayor Zahara.
Yeah, through to our presenter, thank you very much for this information. Is there, maybe Mr. Shapates can answer this, do we need to go into close to discuss anything, or just the public presentation?
Go ahead, Mr. Shapates.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through to the mayor. I don't believe that we have anything from our side, from administration for closed at this time.
Thank you, Mr. Shapates. Councillor Chachka.
Thanks. Through the chair to administration. My question is just regarding the budgets and the years. I know we've approved the records management budget. Were any of the other items in there already included in our budget as well? I know this review was, but were any of the next steps, I guess, included in our 2025?
Mr. Shapates.
Through the chair to Councillor Chachka, not at this time. It would be in future budgets, like 26, 27, 28.
Great. I see nobody else in the queue. All right. Well, thank you very much for your presentation. That's some good information. We at the high end, we've got to deal with some of the headaches of our IT stuff before, and had our IT guy come to the rescue in the council chambers. So it's something we're experienced with. Thank you very much. Anything in closing?
Just again, my thanks, and my thanks to council through you for inviting me this evening, and my thanks through you to the staff. They were very professional to work with, very timely. I don't always get to tag that part in at the end of my presentation, so that is much appreciated.
Great. Thank you very much. All right, council. We have no closed session stuff, so I will declare this meeting adjourned. Right?